In the news tonight, the Syrian army advances north of Aleppo, pressing an offensive to take the besieged part of the city, and the European Union proposes a new humanitarian plan in coordination with the UN. The British Prime Minister says she will trigger the divorce process from the European Union by the end of March, marking the start of the country's biggest shift in policy since World War II. And India, the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, formally joins the Paris Agreement on tackling climate change, taking global pact a step closer to its enactment. Good evening, welcome to a new edition of the news. A royal decree has appointed Major General Mahmoud Frihad as chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, effective as of today. Major General Mahmoud Frihad replaces General Mish'al al-Zibin, who retires from his post as of today. Zibin, however, remains as military advisor to His Majesty the King. Jordan, along with other Arab and Muslim countries, celebrated today the Hijri New Year. The celebration marks the 1,438 lunar years since the migration or journey of Prophet Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina, where they established the nucleus of an Islamic state. On this occasion, His Majesty received cables of congratulations from several leaders of Arab and Muslim countries. His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein also received similar cables from senior officials and officers. The Syrian army and allied forces advanced north of Aleppo, pressing their offensive to take the insurgent-held eastern part of the city. The Syrian army told rebels in a statement to leave the area, offering safe passage and aid supplies, urging them to let civilian residents live their normal lives. The army, supported by Iranian-backed militia and Russian air powers, began their push some 10 days ago to take the whole of the divided city after a ceasefire collapsed last month. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and the Syrian military said the army and its allies had advanced south from the Handarat refugee camp north of Aleppo city, which they took earlier this week, taking the Kindi hospital and parts of the Shuqayf industrial area. The Syrian Foreign Ministry said in a statement carried by the state media that the participation of Russia's air force in the conflict has tightened the nose on terrorist group and reduced their ability to spread terror to other countries. Meanwhile, the European Union is proposing a new humanitarian plan in coordination with the United Nations for the besieged half of the Aleppo, but says it requires cooperation from all parties to the conflict. The plan aims to deliver medical, water and food aid from EU stocks in government-held Western Aleppo to up to 130,000 people in insurgent-controlled Eastern Aleppo, and to evacuate urgent medical cases from the area. The EU calls on all parties to urgently provide the necessary authorization for aid delivery and for medical evacuation to proceed. In a statement, the EU also said it was mobilizing a €25 million emergency aid package for its humanitarian partners in Aleppo and other priority areas of Syria. Libyan forces resumed a ground attack against Daesh terrorists encircled in their former stronghold of Sirte. At least 6 members of the Libyan forces were killed in the fighting. The forces also said the bodies of at least 10 slain terrorists have been counted. Forces dominated by fighters from Misrata and aligned with Libya's UN-backed government have been battling to recapture Sirte for more than 4 months. Supported since August 1st by U.S. airstrikes, they have taken control of most of the city and have been besieged militants trapped in a thin residential strip near Sirte's seafront for several weeks. British Prime Minister Theresa May is saying she will trigger the divorce process from the European Union by the end of March. The move will mark the start of the country's biggest shift in policy since World War II. Appointed Prime Minister shortly after Britain voted in June to leave the bloc, May has been under pressure from EU officials, investors and members of her Conservative Party to offer more on her plan for Britain's exit beyond her catchphrase, "Brexit means Brexit." In an interview with BBC for the first time today, May confirmed she will trigger Article 50 of the EU's Lisbon Treaty before the end of March next year. Asked whether her government would prioritise immigration over access to tariff-free trade with EU countries in divorce talks with the bloc, May said only that she wanted to get the right deal.
I know some people ask about the trade-off between controlling immigration and trading with Europe. But that's the wrong way to look at things. We voted to leave the European Union and become a fully independent sovereign country. We will do what independent sovereign countries do. We will decide for ourselves how we control immigration, and we will be free to pass our own laws.
Hungarians voted in a referendum on the European Union's migrant quotas. Under the scheme, Hungary would receive 1,294 asylum seekers. Opinion polls predict that an overwhelming majority of people will vote to reject the EU's plan. In a letter published in a daily newspaper yesterday, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán urged Hungarians to send a message to the EU that its migration policies were flawed and posed a threat to Europe's security. Orbán, who has been in power since 2010, is among the toughest opponents of immigration in the EU. Over the past year, he has sealed Hungary's southern border with Serbia and Croatia to migrants, placing a razor wire fence along the border patrolled by thousands of army and police. But while the government says immigration policy should be a matter of national sovereignty, human rights groups have criticized Budapest for stoking fears and xenophobia and for mistreating refugees at the border. India, the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, formally joined the Paris Agreement on tackling climate change, taking the global pact a step closer to its enactment. The deal, agreed by nearly 200 countries in Paris last December, aims to slash greenhouse gas emissions by shifting away from fossil fuels to limit global warming. So far, 61 nations representing 47.8% of emissions have ratified, led by China and the United States, and the EU ratification would push it over the line. Next week, the European Union is expected to complete the joint ratification, which will be a major milestone as it will take approvals past the 55% mark and put the deal into effect ahead of next round of climate talks in November in Morocco.
Reputation was on the line, because remember that they said that Europe is too complicated to agree quickly. They said we had too many obstacles. They said we were all talk, and they even started to question whether our heart was really in it. Today clearly showed that we mean business. Today's agreement shows unity and solidarity as member states take a European approach, just as we did in Paris.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump took to Twitter to respond to a New York Times report suggesting he may have been able to avoid paying federal income taxes for years. The Clinton campaign seized on the report, which came out late yesterday, and sent it out in a mass email to the media, while Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton said for nearly 2 decades Trump has avoided paying taxes, while tens of millions of working families paid theirs. According to the New York Times report, Trump declared a $916 million loss in his 1995 income tax returns, allowing him to avoid paying federal income taxes for up to 18 years. The Trump campaign, in a statement responding to the Times report, said the tax document was obtained illegally and that the New York Times is operating as an extension of the Clinton campaign. Trump has declined to release his tax records, saying his taxes are under a federal audit. In Iraq, where one Baghdad resident is turning waste and scraps from conflicts and war into art. Born in the 90s, Abdelkader works at his scrap art studio to transform the throwaway waste and scraps into take-home handiworks and artifacts such as tanks, robots, miniature Harleys, and even insects. Abdelkader at first wanted to find peace in a hobby, but now his hobby has become a full-time career job and is being joined by some young people in his Baghdad studio. His quest for scrap is not without surprises and dangers, though. Apart from dodging potential booby traps and in collapsed buildings, Abdelkader has to make his move unsuspected by security troops, which have often mistaken him for a potential terrorist seeking material for improvised explosive devices. As he builds art from scrap, he hopes that his country will one day genuinely rebuild from waste and scraps as well. Britain's Prince William and Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, together with their two children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, arrived to board a float plane for their official departure from Canada in British Columbia. The royal family was wrapping up their week-long trip to Canada. It was the first time the couple have brought their children, Charlotte and George, on an official visit to the country. Here's more.
Britain's Prince William and his wife Kate spent the last day of their visit to Canada meeting members of the public in Victoria, British Columbia. The couple, this time without their two young children in tow, visited a charity for victims of domestic violence. The pair spent some time chatting to people lining the street for a glimpse. Finally, they boarded a tall ship for a sail around Victoria's picturesque harbour. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, as they're officially known, and their children, Charlotte and George, have been given an enthusiastic welcome throughout this week-long visit to Canada. William is second in line to succeed his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, who's been Canada's head of state since she became monarch in 1952.
And to the world of fashion, where Valentino ushered in a new era with Pierpaolo Piccoli's first show as sole creative director of the label. After co-creative director Maria Grazia Chiuri departed to Christian Dior last season, Pierpaolo Piccoli made his solo debut at Paris Fashion Week, focusing on opening a new chapter for the Italian label. He is focusing on ramping up wearability with frothy tulle and romantic laces, reworking the Valentino signature into more casual dresses. Mini-sized crossbody bags lend on-the-go feels to the look, and much like the clothes, the footwear collection championed the idea of easy, luxurious flats. Daniel Ricciardo claimed an elusive maiden win of the season at a dramatic Formula One Malaysian Grand Prix. The Australian handed victory when a race leading Lewis Hamilton retired with a blown engine. Ricciardo was shadowed across the line by his 19-year-old Red Bull teammate Max Verstappen. Nico Rosberg finished third for Mercedes, fighting back for his 21st after being spun around by Sebastian Vettel. Raikkonen finished fourth for Ferrari after battling Rosberg for the final podium spot. The Finn, unable to take advantage of the penalty handed to his rival after the German clattered into him while overtaking. Sébastien Ogier moved closer to the World Rally Championship title after he claimed victory in the Corsica Rally for the first time in his career. The Frenchman entered the final day with a 46.5 seconds lead over second-place Thierry Neuville of Belgium and was not troubled over the final two stages as he crossed the finish line with a lead of 46.4 seconds. Norway's Andreas Mikkelsen finished third, enough to postpone Ogier's title celebration for at least 2 more weeks. And finally, fair conditions continue in most regions for the rest of tonight, with easterly to southeasterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, normal summer conditions prevail in most regions, with a high temperature persist in Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. The Gulf of Aqaba should also expect hot conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, is a recap of our top stories. The Syrian army advances north of Aleppo, pressing an offensive to take the besieged part of the city, and the European Union proposes a new humanitarian plan in coordination with the UN. The British Prime Minister says she will trigger the divorce process from the European Union by the end of March, marking the start of the country's biggest shift in policy since World War II. And India, the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, formally joins the Paris Agreement on tackling climate change, taking the global pact a step closer to its enactment. And with this, we come to an end. I'm Farah. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.